Hi, John.
We are recording.
Do we want
It's
to?
10 hours.
Yeah. Should we wait another few minutes to make sure everybody gets in okay, Ron?
Go ahead and get started.
Okay. Let me get rid of my message there. All right. Well, welcome everyone on this kind of gloomy Wednesday, but it's going to be great now because you're here in this session with us. And I am thrilled to welcome you to this Communicating with Emotional Intelligence session today. It's my pleasure to introduce Carrie, who's an assistant professor of communication at Chesapeake College and the founder of EQ Central, specializing in emotional intelligence, leadership development, and organizational communication. With more than a decade of experience in higher education and consulting, Carrie equips individuals and teams with the skills to communicate better, navigate conflict, enhance collaboration, and lead with emotional intelligence. And with that, I will turn it over to Carrie. Let me just stop sharing so she can take over and share her slides. I will be moderating the chat while she's transitioning. Feel free to pop questions into the chat, and I'll make sure that Carrie sees them or will hear from them. If I need to get you to come off a mic, I'll ask you to do so. Thank you so much. And without further ado, here is Carrie.
Well, thank you, Alissa, for that warm welcome. And thank you all for being here this morning. I know it's cold and gray, but I always think that they're the best kind of days where you can get the most work done. As Alissa said, I am an assistant professor over at Chesapeake College. I've been there for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, still in Maryland, I was at Anne Arundel, and then prior to that, I was in Colorado for about 10 years at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. The reason we came back to Maryland was because my husband was military at the time, and Uncle Sam said, "It's time for you to go home." And then we got home, and my husband said, "I think it's enough. I'm going to retire, so we're here permanently." She said a little bit about me, where the EQ Central actually comes in or where the emotional intelligence comes in. I had never even heard of it before, had no clue, didn't know anything about it, didn't actually care to know anything about it at the time. And it was during my PhD program where after the first year where I was working on veterans in transition. That was going to be the cornerstone of my PhD. After the first year, things did not go well. And my boss at the time was like, "Why don't you do something with emotional intelligence?" I was like, "Well, I don't even know what that is." So she was actually a certified emotional intelligence coach. She sent me the assessment, gave me my debrief, and from that point on, I was hooked. And over the years, I've been able to elaborate not just on the psychology behind emotions, but what is emotional intelligence? How do we regulate emotions? And where that comes in with the communication connection, which is a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully, and I know that with webinars, it's always tricky. I was looking on LinkedIn yesterday. There's a million different webinars that people could have signed up for today, not just through Maryland Online, but I was just noticing a trend like Wednesday webinar, Wednesday webinar. So I really do appreciate you choosing this one. Hopefully you can take something away with you that you can use immediately. If not, please feel free to tell me constructively. And that helps me with that feedback to do better next time. But today, what I really want to concentrate on is understanding the connection between our emotions and how we communicate. We are currently experiencing a larger discourse, if you think of the larger national discourse, which from my perspective is very emotional. And we are reacting and communicating based in the emotions and not maybe in the situation, or we're not objectively looking at the situation. So I want to explore that a little bit more. I also want to talk about the impact of emotional intelligence on effective communication. You can still be emotionally intelligent and not be the best communicator. Emotional intelligence is a skill. It's something we have to work on all the time. It's not something you don't wake up one morning and go to the lacrosse field and pick up a stick and become a pro lacrosse player. You have to work at it. EI is the same thing. And then I want to help learn strategies or teach you strategies to help regulate your emotions and improve communication skills. Now, keep in mind, this could be a 16-week class. This could be an 8-week seminar. This could be a lot of different things. So it's a short period of time, but I'm hopeful that I can give you some of those things. Now, I know that Alissa put in the chat to put your name and the college, but if any of you wanted to come off your mics, which is totally fine, it's still a fairly small group. I'm just interested in what was your reasoning behind joining this particular webinar. So if anyone wants to come off, they can. They can also put it in the chat if they want to, and I'll give it a moment.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Barclay, and I work at Prince George's Community College and E-Learning Services. Glad to be with you all this morning. And my reason for joining is because I can be a direct communicator for better or worse, and I think I could do a better job of appreciating who I'm speaking with and how they may be feeling and how my words impact them.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And being direct isn't always a bad thing. So I think how we can approach that is just trying to figure out the other part is making the other party heard, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm really glad you're here today. Thank you for being here. And I think Wanda has her hand up.
Yes, good morning. My name is Wanda from Program Director for Ambicionas in Howard Community College. And I think my main goal is to keep improving my set skills in listening as an academic and life coach for the cohort that I serve here at Howard Community College.
Great, great. Hopefully this will be of use to you today. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else before we move on?
We have a couple of great comments also in the chat as well. Carrie, do you have access to those or would you like me to read those?
I do. Keeping up with the latest and practices related to EI, yes. It seems to be changing on a daily basis. I lead classes on EI periodically. Wanted to hear another perspective, yes. Most EI practices, contract training classes, and I like to improve as a supervisor, colleague, as well as a parent, yes. I will tell you that I was learning EI way before I had my daughter. And Sylvia, go ahead, Sylvia.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. You can finish your thought.
No, I was just going to tell my daughter is how I think I became more emotionally intelligent, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a math professor at the CCBC, Baltimore County, Community College of Baltimore County, and I have an adult ADHD, and on top of it, I'm Polish. So between directness and the lack of kind of not recognizing when apparently what I say is not, it doesn't come across well. I would like to learn more. So because I find sometimes that my students will say, especially in the emails, that I come across as rude, and I read this email and like I just stated the plain facts, like, you know, look up in the syllabus or something like that. So I don't know. I'm hoping it will be helpful. Thank you.
I hope so too. And I spend a lot of time emailing back saying, please read the syllabus. So I'm right there with you. Well, great. Let's dive in a little bit. So here's another thing. Think of a time when emotions impacted a conversation you had, and it could be positive or negative, and what happened in those situations. Anybody want to share? Usually my emotions get the best of me when it's my husband and I. I teach emotional intelligence. I have tested to be fairly on the higher side of emotional intelligence, but there is something about conversations that I have with my husband, and it could just be something, you know, make sure you remember to do A and B. And the time comes when A and B are supposed to be completed and they're not. And then I look at him and I was like, hey, what happened to A and B? And he's like, what are you talking about? I've also had to learn that my husband has selective hearing, and he tunes me out a lot. And granted, there are times where I don't blame him for doing that, but it does, it does impact you emotionally because I think at the heart of everything, which we'll get to a little bit today, is wanting to feel like we are heard. So, what is emotional intelligence? And several of you are practitioners, you've been teaching it, you've been using it. There are a lot of models out there, but the specific model that I teach from, that I train from, is the Multi-Health Systems Emotional Intelligence or Emotional Quotient Inventory, the EQI 2.0. So, that is the definition that I use. That's the definition that I tend to incorporate into most things that I do with the EQI. And it's really, at the end of the day, it's being able to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, as well as recognizing, understanding, and not necessarily, but managing others' emotions. And basically, if you're managing someone else's emotions, you are managing your reactions to those emotions and trying to recognize and understand those, as well as the ones within yourself. It does involve the ability to identify and express your emotions, to use emotions to guide your thoughts and behaviors, to understand and empathize with others' emotions, and to regulate one's own emotions and responses to various situations. And empathy is a huge part of emotional intelligence. And it's one of the things that I think has come under fire lately, especially in the broader national conversation. And I still think that empathy is the one thing that we can use to find that common ground if we're willing and able to. Empathy, you have to work at it. It is not something that you are magically born with. You may have some based on how you were raised, but I do think it is that link, and that's why it's so important in the emotional intelligence world and part of everything we do with EI. Now, what is communication? As a communication professor, it's a very interesting way that we look at communication. There's different models, there's different theories, but really what it boils down to, it's a process where we are relaying some sort of thought or idea via some sort of message through a medium to another person. It's truly what it is. And I think that there are so many impactful factors that diminish quality communication, effective communication. And effective can be in the eye of the beholder. Depends on the context of the situation. But if you think about languages and cultural differences, and when you add emotional states on top of all of that, plus the environment that you're in, it makes it very difficult to be able to concentrate on the communication piece, which is why today's webinar, I think, is really important to kind of help us take a step back and look at what we're saying and how we're saying it. Most of what effective communication is really just being aware of all of this and how it does impact your message. Do we ever really think about the actual message? We normally just do. And we make a lot of assumptions that our messages are being heard loud and clear and they're being heard exactly as we intended them to. It's not always necessarily how it is interpreted by the other party. So the communication process in general, as a whole, from the communication perspective, this is how we teach it. You have a sender. The sender decides that this is some sort of message. Now, the message can be an idea about a new policy or a new class, or it could be a message following up with someone, asking them if they read your last email. So you want to craft your message, and then you want to send it through a specific channel. And that channel is usually for most of us, faculty and staff, it's going to be email. From a show of hands, how many of you spend a lot of time calling other people? You can just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Can
I
you
have a
repeat the question, please?
So how many people actually call instead of emailing someone? Does anyone still pick up the phone and just call that person? Okay. Checking it out.
There's a few thumbs. It seems equally split.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I have a phone in my office on campus, and literally someone called me the other day and it scared me to death because I had never heard it ring. So I've made it a point to maybe reach out and call people more, because I feel like when we do everything via email, the message or the intended message gets lost. But anyway, you have the sender, you want to send this message, you do it through a specific channel, and then the receiver receives that message, and then they provide a feedback or their feedback, which is their reaction. In this whole process, there is noise from beginning to end, and that noise can be a lot of different things. It could be a physical noise. If you're on the phone with someone and they're doing construction outside your office, it's going to be hard for you to hear the person on the line, and it could be hard for them to hear you on their end of the line. The noise can also be the physical space, but it can also be psychological. So when we are thinking about certain things or we're in a specific situation and somebody sends us a message and maybe we're not completely open or ready for it, we have our own biases that impact how it's interpreted. We have our own, mental barriers and blockages as well. And that's all part of this process. So remember, it's the sender, because this is really important because we'll go through this again. Sender, message, channel, receiver, feedback, amidst nothing but noise. And I think the communication process, when this was initially created theoretically, I think 40 or 50 years ago, it makes a lot of sense. The noise piece is the factor that I think is impacting us all in a way that we may not realize, or we do and are just overwhelmed by it. So when you're thinking about these communications, when you have these noises, when there are these breakdowns, where do these communication breakdowns usually occur for you? Is it with an email? Is it with a phone call? Is it with students? Is it with colleagues? Does anybody want to share or put it into the chat? Yeah, sometimes it's difficult due to the remote workers. Email is most efficient for certain cases. That is true. But I will venture to say that for communication to really work, we have to operate in different modalities. I mean, not everybody loves Zoom either, but switching it up, or if it is a really important subject matter, maybe it's best to be handled face to face. Maybe it's best to be handled with a phone call, if that makes sense. Wanda, you have your hand up?
Well, just lately, this is what I noticed because I'm very I'm focusing in how to improve the communication. So just to be brief, I do notice that I have to maximize my different modalities in order to create the impact that I want to move into an action from a strategy. The different modalities has to be included from an email to follow up with a call. But the only part that I think I need to work better, and I'm looking forward in this presentation, is that I notice that people are not happy when you call. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to even discuss something that is impacting that action to move forward in the project. And unfortunately, it's the way that I noticed that is moving what is needed. So I'm trying to see is the way that I'm texting or, teaming or emailing that I have to improve. But my personal experience just lately is people are not liking the call. Don't bother me. The very briefy, don't just, okay, well, okay, but send it to my email. I send the email and it's not moving forward. It's in the, stay in the box.
And I think that we are still seeing people being very avoidant to the telephone. And people used to say it was generational, it was millennials and Gen Z. But I am just as allergic to the telephone as everybody else. And I think from a communication perspective, avoiding the phone is avoiding a specific type of communication. And I don't know what kind of barriers have been built internally from technology, but they have been. There's plenty of studies that show a lot about what social media has done. But if you think about emails, 85% of what we send on a daily basis is through emails. So, yes, it is convenient and it's really great for when you have to keep tabs on a specific project or things like that. But if you look at the broader perspective of where the emotional piece comes in, emotional intelligence is also designed to help us establish and maintain relationships. Not that these relationships have to be, they don't have to be your bestie. You don't have to, your office mate doesn't have to be your bestie. But emotional intelligence is a way for us to connect differently with other individuals, even if they are very resistant to calls or emails. And I think it's very easy for the person who is sending these, like what you were saying, Wanda, before. The one thing I tell a lot of my clients is when you have tried to send an email or make a phone call that was as constructive as you could possibly make it, and you were being very authentic, but in the end, they didn't receive the message the way you wanted them to receive the message. Part of that says more about them than it actually does you. And I think it is normal human nature to, if we're being authentic in construction, to really take it as a personal affront and then internalize it. But I think we have to start kind of separating and pausing and making sure that we're not reading more into the situation than we are. And that's why I think when you have, and I'll give you an example, something happened this week with another communication course being proposed at the college. And with the com prefix, and I'm new to the college in the sense, like, I don't know all the faculty committees yet. Um, I'm serving on one, I'm doing some other stuff, but it didn't go through the initial proper channels that it was supposed to. So when you look at that and get that email saying, hey, can we meet? Because we wrote this course and we'd like your input now. As a com faculty member, I can take a step back and be really annoyed at the fact that we weren't brought in initially. But then I can also look at it, and here's where that pausing comes in, which we'll talk about. Do I get upset and write, some sort of nasty email back? And what happened is there started to be a flurry because there's like 6 people in the email, of course. And I'm trying to track all these different conversations. So I basically just as constructively as I could wrote back, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Yes, I'm a newbie. I'm not aware of all of these things, but I think we should get together and kind of, I have a lot of questions, and I think it would just be better if we were face to face to talk about these things with all the parties necessary involved. And that was my take on it. And we were going to meet, and then some things higher up happened. So eventually we will meet. But I could have just, like, oh, yeah, we should have been, at the forefront of this. We should have been brought in initially. And if you receive that email, then you're already going to be in some sort of disagreeable mood, if that makes sense, when you do meet face to face. So it's hard because we are in a world where everything is go, 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 go. You know, you've got 15 million emails, you've got students at your door, you've got 15 million different things you've got to grade. Then on top of that, if you have spouses and children and significant others, you have all these responsibilities. And it's way more than it was 50 years ago. So, and we live in this world that is just constant pinging, ping, 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 ping. And those pings are maybe it's an email, maybe it's a message. It could be a text message, it could be a social media message, it could be a LinkedIn message. So I feel like it is very difficult for us to communicate in such a world. And we do it without even thinking. And sometimes it doesn't end the way that we expect it to, if that makes sense. Any questions before I move on? Oh, I see something in the chat. Wanda says just lately start calling. It does change for good the information to share with the other party. Yes. Did I miss anything? When email threads get out of control, a phone call is usually necessary. That's from John. That is very true. Call after 3 email. Oh, the 3 email rule. That's a good one. Okay. Okay. I think we can keep going. All right. So our emotions, they really do influence everything, not just communication. So if we think about communication in general and how our emotions impact them, think of tone of voice. Think of your word choices, body language. People do not realize that your nonverbal communication is being picked up through brain signals so much more and at a higher rate than the words you say. It is a crazy thing. And there's all these new studies where there's a confluence of neuroscience and communication, but also neurobiology and emotions. So there's all these new things that are happening that I think are really, really interesting. We also have, as part of, psychological barriers, we have our own perceptions, how we interpret what others say. And we all have to remember, and I know it's really, really hard, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's super easy because it's not. Our perceptions are just that. They are only our perceptions. I could stand with 5 people and watch a scene unfold in front of the 5 of us. And if I waited 10 minutes and we all started to talk about what we saw, I can guarantee you we would see 5 different things. There will be some similarities, but there will also be some vast differences. So I think we have to understand that our emotions lead to these perceptions. And then listening skills. I don't know what has happened in the last 10 years, but I feel like we don't listen. If we are listening, we're listening to respond. We are not listening to hear what the other person is saying. And part of that is because we are heightened by an impaired emotional state. So the example I give is a professor receiving critical feedback from a student, and they react defensively, maybe because they were feeling overwhelmed, versus responding constructively when calm. But if you think more broadly than that, think of conversations that we have with people, think of conversations that we have with colleagues, maybe from different departments, maybe they're not in the same department, maybe they're not in the same discipline. I think it's really hard to regulate the emotional response because we tend to have an emotional response to everything first. So if you think about what the brain is doing, and we'll talk a little bit about this, every response you have to something, first and foremost, is emotional, then physiological, then logical. And I say that because it's what's happening in the brain. And if you think of the limbic system, which is the emotional system of the brain, it is the second oldest part of the brain. And while we have evolved with the prefrontal cortex, pieces of our limbic system, like the amygdala, hasn't necessarily evolved. So when I say that, you can have a conversation with someone and they can say something, they can look at you a specific way, or they say something about the topic at hand that you don't like, and the first thing your amygdala does is up there a threat, like the red lights start going off, you feel like you're in a nuclear missile silo. That's everything's going off, everything's lighting, because your amygdala doesn't know the difference between a conversation and whether you're going to die hunting that day, because it has two jobs: to keep you safe and to keep you procreating. And it's your threat detector. And it really detects everything as a threat. And if it gets stuck there, you can't use your prefrontal cortex then to mitigate the emotional response. And this takes us on a great segue into the brain. So the 3 pounds that we have up here are the most amazing 3 pounds in our entire body. I geek out a little bit with the brain. I think it's just a fascinating piece of us that I don't think we think about enough. But when we talk about the brain, in the most simplest form, you can break it down into 3 areas. You've got the neocortex, which is up here, which is your prefrontal cortex. This is where we do reasoning and problem solving, creativity. This is where we house the impulse control. And if you're wondering why people between the ages of 18 and 25 can do really stupid things, it's because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed and they're very impulsive and they struggle with decision making because they're being driven by the limbic system. And the limbic system is where the amygdala is. That's your fight, flight, and freeze. That's where you're trying to regulate your emotions. That's where empathy is. This is where we learn to affiliate and connect. This is where your tolerance is. And then the oldest part of our brain is the brainstem. And this is basically the part of our brain that's truly keeping us alive. It regulates the heartbeat, respiration, your blood pressure. It's connected to your circadian rhythms and certain hormones that correspond with eating and being full and not being full, and it's very reactive. So your brainstem and your limbic system, despite being our best friends hundreds of thousands of years ago when the first humans existed and didn't have any oral communication, sometimes it really gets in the way of what we're trying to do now. And that's where the emotional intelligence piece comes in understanding where we are emotionally, how we react emotionally, and what we can do to regulate that. Any other questions? Let me see. Okay, fine, okay. So the emotional brain barrier, basically what I did was I took the communication process because I really like this form better. I'm sure people would disagree, but I'm using it today and we're going to look at it together. So you have the sender and receiver. And then in the sender and receiver's world, they have a gazillion things going on: work, school, family, parents, animals, you name it, everything's happening. And then the sender has the intent to send a message. They want to focus on this. They want to send the message through whatever channel they decide to send it in. And then the receiver is trying to listen to whatever this message is. And then they have this emotional reaction. And then they have the feedback. Where everything gets lost is in the middle, which is where the noise is. So if you think about what environment are you in when you send it? What channel are you using to send it? What is the context? Are you using appropriate language? Are you listening to what someone said before you respond to the message? There's also physical noise. There's also bias. There's also perceptions. When you think about it this way, it really makes it difficult to even factor in the communication piece in and of itself. But I do find that through all of this, with the ability to truly understand emotional intelligence and your own emotional intelligence. And trust me, there are some days where I feel like the least emotional intelligent person on the planet. I really do. And I think it's one of those things, like I said at the beginning, it's a skill. You have to continually work on it. And I really try. Some days I fail, but then I start again the next day. Any questions on the emotion brain barrier? Okay. So I want to ask, has anyone here today, some of you had mentioned that you do the trainings, but have any of you received zero training at all in communication or emotional intelligence? And you can do a thumbs up. Oh, Cynthia. Did you want to say something or are you doing a thumbs up?
I was just doing a thumbs up.
Oh,
I had a quick question for you. I teach art and I was trained that there's a right and left side of our brain, the artistic, creative, the analytical,
yeah.
mathematical. Is that true? Or do you?
Yes and no. So what neuroscientists say now is that there are certain, if you were to have, say you have a brain injury to a specific side of your brain,
Mhm.
that could potentially impact your creativity or your motor function or, being able to reason and problem solve. So there is that. But what they're saying now is that because of all the neuronal connections, that both sides of the brain are constantly communicating to each other.
Mhm.
And I think, and part of it is, neuroscience is very new, just like psychiatry. It's like 100 years old. I mean, these are all very new, and psychology too. As science evolves and we learn more, like initially it was very left brain, right brain. If you're more this type, if you're more creative, you're this side of the brain, and vice
Right,
versa.
right.
Now they're discovering because of fMRI scans and, being able to do, I think they're called angiograms where in the brain where they can put dye into, veins, but also they can, in the fMRI, they can also look at the neuronal connections and they're showing
Mm.
that they all work together. I don't think there's a left and right in that sense anymore. I think
Okay.
even though they're two completely different hemispheres,
Right.
they operate simultaneously and together.
Okay, that's good. That's new information. Thank you.
And I do think that it means that everyone has the ability to be creative if they, and it's not just working at it. I think we all put mental blocks on ourselves, and as children,
Mhm.
and we sometimes don't realize this, but we put mental blocks into our children. It's sort of like the fixed mindset, like, oh, you can't do art. You're just
Right.
drawing stick people.
Right.
That shuts people down so that when they're older, if they don't try again, they may never see that they can be creative,
Mhm.
either artistically or through writing or through all different areas.
So, okay, great.
Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see, no formal training. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things. I know, like for communication, there's all sorts of training that you can do and be a fantastic public speaker in 48 hours. There's Toastmasters too. And a lot of these things kind of drive me crazy because, doing a presentation like this is not the same as doing a TED Talk. It's not the same of doing something at Toastmasters. It's not a manuscript. I didn't memorize this. So there's a lot of different things as far as communication training goes. And it's very similar with emotional intelligence. Like, I think you have to tailor emotional intelligence training to the audience that you have. Um, and a lot of the research shows different, like a lot of the research, if you do just a generic basic Google Scholar search, and I'm not a huge fan of Google Scholar, but if you just put in EQI 2.0 and nursing, EQI and higher education, EQI and medicine, business, it's going to come up with all sorts of peer-reviewed good research. We're also using it more. A lot of clients I certified and worked with the Ontario, Canada Police Department back in June. And they have a conflict management unit built into their police department that is designed to not only work with their police officers, but they're also community facing to de-escalate types of conflict. And now they're going to start using emotional intelligence to do that as well. So there's lots of fascinating things that are happening in the world of EI. But what does the data say? Because I think it would be weird to have a higher education webinar and not have data. Maybe that's just me, but here's why it's important. And I can sit here and tell you that it's important just because I feel that it's important, but that doesn't mean anything. So there's a lot of research, especially within the last 15 years, but in the last 5, EI is positively correlated with job performance, leadership effectiveness, and job satisfaction. And that's from DeGru in 2022. Research has shown that individuals with higher levels of emotional intelligence tend to have better mental health and cope better with stress and adversity. Fataya and Awad in 2020. There's also a lot of research on the connections between emotional intelligence and mental health. And while you have the mental health of people are diagnosed with specific mental health issues, it doesn't mean that EI can cure that. There's some things that have to be managed with medication and psychotherapy. But at the outset, if you can regulate your emotions and you're understanding the situation contextually, and you have the ability to constructively express your emotions, you have the ability to constructively be assertive, you have a good support network, and you can manage your stress, these are all applications of emotional intelligence, then you will be able to deal with stress and adversity better. According to a study by Landry in 2020 in the Harvard Business Review, 90% of high performers have a high level of emotional intelligence. The World Economic Forum, how many of you are familiar with the World Economic Forum? Anybody? Okay. Every 5 years they do this, it's the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, and they literally do it every 5 years. And they go through, it's a fascinating report. I just found the 2025. They talk about what skills are not being used as much, what skills might be obsolete, but they also talk about the types of jobs and the markets that are flourishing and the ones that are not flourishing. They talk about skills that are going to be needed and necessary. And part of that, I always go in because for the last 15 years, emotional intelligence, the actual word, has been part of the top 15. So I just went in to see if it was still there, and I was looking at different stuff, and there's all this new AI stuff. They didn't have emotional intelligence per se, but they said that they identified many of the EI skills that will be in demand over the next 5 years, and that includes being resilient, so stress tolerance, being flexible, dealing with change, self-awareness. In the EI world, we call that emotional self-awareness, empathy, active listening. And active listening is really important because it shows that we're actually listening, and we can ask questions to also indicate that we were listening, and we can also ask for clarification. And I don't think that a majority of the population is intentionally not listening. I just think with the pace that we are on and the amount of messaging that we get in a day, it's very hard to really focus. But if we want to truly listen to each other, we have to figure out a way to focus. The Center for Creative Leadership reports that leaders with higher EI are more effective as they can handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. That's from Tompkins in 2023. Research has shown that emotional intelligence can be improved through training and practice, and that even small increases in emotional intelligence can have significant benefits for personal and professional success. And that's from Corby et al. In 2019. There's also a ton of research about students and emotional intelligence, and the higher their emotional intelligence, the more they're likely to academically succeed. And last but not least, this is the newest area of research with emotional intelligence. EI plays a crucial role in recognizing and resisting AI-driven manipulation, making it vital for organizations to train employees to identify emotional triggers, practice reflection, and respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively to reduce the risk of generative AI exploitation. Now, obviously, we could do 20 webinars on this, but I thought this was really interesting. And we've talked about our communication barriers. Emotions can be barriers, but they can also, if you think of emotions, it is just more data for you. They're sort of also like the weather. They don't stay very long. They don't have to stay very long. You know, the clouds will move on, the rain will stop. Inactive listening is a barrier. Perceptions and biases are barriers. And technology and time. We're short on time as it is. And the influx of technology does make it very difficult for us. So the three major, I think, communication skills as associated with EI are empathy, flexibility, and assertiveness. And keep in mind, assertiveness is not, you should do this, you should do that. It is a way for you to either give a directive or advocate for yourself in a specific way. Now, how about some strategies for doing all of this? It's not easy, but we can do some things. So for the self-regulation piece, you've got to identify what the emotion is first and foremost. If you're angry, why are you angry? If you're sad, what is it that's making you sad? If you're frustrated, what is it that's making you frustrated? You have to reframe these thoughts, like shift from a defensive reaction to, well, why am I feeling this way? Why am I so frustrated? Is it because, you know, this student didn't turn in her paper when she said she would? If you are the journaling type, I'm not a very good journaling person, but a lot of people are. You can journal your emotions. You can put the day, you can put the emotion, and then you can think about what caused it. And then as you do this for a week, then you can look and identify if you can find any patterns. So maybe it's a specific person that's setting you off for whatever reason. Or maybe the days that you were the most overwhelmed, you had the worst emotional reactions. And then the final one is the pause method. And this is the hardest one, I think, is just stopping and pausing and taking a breath before we open our mouths. Now, there is a pause method. So in an effort to communicate more effectively and to manage your emotions, we pause. We take in a deep breath. We separate the person from the problem. When you do breathing, typically box breathing, which is 4 in through the nose, you hold it for 4, let it out for 4 through the mouth, and then hold it for another 4. This helps the brain and nervous system to pause and to not be so reactive. Then once we've paused and we've taken that breath, we can truly listen to hear and not to respond. And then when it is our time to respond, we can respond more constructively because we are paying attention to the mood. We're paying attention to ourselves, the environment, and body language, both our own and other people. So what I want to do in the last few minutes is, if you think of a conversation that you've had, is there a sentence that you can make your go-to sentence, a response that you could use in a tense situation? Anybody have any ideas? It's okay if you don't, because I came up with some for you, because I wanted to make sure you left with the ability to do one of these.
You could ask for a pause. You could say, can I take a minute here to just collect my thoughts?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You would say more in the spiritual community, can I take a minute to go inside and whatever? But you ask for permission, and so they're not thinking you're just dissing them or ignoring them. You're actually kind of setting it up like, this is why I'm not talking right now. I just need a minute. Can I just take a moment here?
Absolutely. So I try to do some helpful language. So if you're feeling defensive, and I think a lot of us struggle with that, at least I do, you can say, look, I hear that this came across differently than I intended. Let me try to clarify. If someone raises their voice to you, I want to talk about this, and I can do that better if we just slow down a bit. And we're going to have to pause before we say these things. If you need time to regulate your own emotions, like if you get in a very heated discussion, you can just say, I need a minute to think before I respond. Let's pause and come back to this. I'm just going to need a minute. Here's what I like to refer to as when you disagree with the other person and you don't want to get fired. This is one of the things that you can say. I can see how you got there. I'm looking at this differently. Want to walk through both of our perspectives instead of just saying, you're wrong, you're an idiot. That's how you get fired. So this is a better way to do it. If you get interrupted, and many people get interrupted, especially in meetings and conversations, it's pausing, it's breathing, and then saying, I want to make sure we both feel heard. I'll finish my thought, and then I want to hear yours. Instead of just looking at the person and say, why you keep interrupting me? Because usually that's going to make the other person more defensive. And yes, this is what I mean by emotional regulation. We have to emotionally regulate and breathe and pause to be able to say these in a calm, authentic manner. If a boundary is required, some of us are great at boundaries, some of us are terrible at boundaries. But if you do need to set a boundary in the moment, pause, take that breath. I want to have this conversation, but the tone is making it really difficult. Can we reset and try this again? So these are all things that you can write down. These are things that you can rehearse and memorize. So when something does happen and you can feel it physiologically, if you're in a situation where you're really frustrated or really angry or really upset, you can pause, you can take that deep breath, and then you can say one of these, whichever the situation calls for. And they do actually work. They really do, but you have to say it in a way that's allowing the other person to hear you. You can't, if I say when I disagree and don't want to get fired, you can't say it in a way like, oh, I see how you got here. I'm looking at it differently. You want to walk through both perspectives? That makes it more difficult to hear. Wanda, you have your hand up?
Yes, it's just a question. What happened in situations in where the person is not responding, is quiet, there's a freeze, there's a sense of I cannot speak. And it can be taken as manipulation, or can be taken as dismissing the conversation, when in reality your body respond
The
with
nonverbals.
nonverbal.
Yeah. So in that sense, I don't know the context of the situation, but again, we have the messaging and we're making the assumptions based on the other person's reaction. In that case, I would say, you know what? I'm sensing this really isn't a good time for us to talk about this. Is there a time when I can come back and we can discuss the situation? Because I'm happy to reschedule. Because I think in those cases, they're having an emotional reaction and they're not saying anything because they're probably afraid if they do say something, it's not going to be constructive. Or if there are people who shut down, there are a lot of people who, when frustrated, they automatically shut down. And I think you have to see, if you're able to see that and you're able to be authentic, just say, you know what, I'm sensing that this really isn't a good time to talk about this. Is
I
there
think
another
it's just the question is more because that's my reaction.
your reaction?
That's my reaction. It's not, I don't know, it demonstrates like a lack of emotional intelligence, probably. I'm not sure if that's the case in this, but it's just shutting. I shut down not because I want to. That's not true. I do not shut. It's just that it's freezing. My head,
Okay.
my body shut down.
So
And
you're
it's taken as I don't want to negotiate or engage.
okay. So I think what's happening is your amygdala, honestly, whatever that conversation was about, your amygdala sees it as a threat, whatever it is. And it could just be a generic conversation. When your amygdala is overreactive like that and it freezes you, you remember fight, flight, or freeze, that's when you have to pause and take a step back and breathe. Because what happens is when that's going on in your brain, you tend to hold your breath. Have you ever noticed if you're holding your breath by chance?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So in those situations, in order for you to regulate, you have to even acknowledge that your amygdala is on fire. Like, oh wow, because what's happening is your body is shooting your entire system with adrenaline and cortisol, and you are holding your breath and you have all these like physiological things. You can't hear a word the other person's saying, so they're just assuming you're shutting down. So you have to, in that situation, you can say to the other person, you know what? Please give me a moment. I just need a moment before I respond. And then you need to either walk away or go somewhere else and just take a deep breath and help regulate the amygdala so that the amygdala knows that you're not in danger. And I know it sounds really weird to say that, but that is the job of the amygdala. Everything is a threat. And when we feel like we are in danger, physiologically, we either clam up, we run, we fight. So for you, I think your reaction is just to freeze. That makes sense? Hope so.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
And then here's just some sentences you can use in any situation. Help me understand your perspective. I need a moment before I respond. Let's slow down so we can hear each other. I can see why that matters to you. We don't have to agree to move forward. And the other thing is when you are talking one-on-one to someone, if you want to have that complete focus, put your laptop away, put your phone somewhere else. Make sure that there aren't distractions so that each of you can actually be heard. That wraps up all I have for today, but I'm willing to take any questions that anyone has. I think there's some stuff in the chat.
Yeah, I also, Carrie, this was awesome. Some people might need to dart out. So I just wanted, if you don't mind, to share the completion certificate so they can get a screenshot of it. And then we can continue with questions if that's okay.
Okay.
I
Stop
think I can
sharing.
just take it away from you.
Take it away.
Thank you all. We're going to continue the conversation. Feel free to hang out if you want, but I know I wanted to be mindful of the time, and thank you for attending today. If you wanted to get a screenshot of this completion certificate, there you are. I think I can also attach a file in the chat if some of you have problems. Maybe you're not able to take a screenshot for whatever reason. I think I have one on my computer here. So let's see if that works as well. And I'll leave this up. Feel free to come off of mute if you want to continue to ask questions and engage with Carrie, and it's great content.
I had a quick question, Carrie. Do you have recommended training? Like, where do we go next? Where do we get training?
That is a good question.
It sounds like you offer this as is this your business? I missed the introduction, so.
It is, and so I don't when I'm doing something like this, I don't like to say, hey, I could do training for you. I can create whatever you want. I feel
Right.
really weird doing that, but I can. And that's technically what I do outside of Chesapeake. Um,
Can you put that in the chat? Can somebody put that in the chat? Or maybe Alyssa, you can put that in the chat. I mean, I would like to do personal training, but I also see this would be of value for our school community of faculty and staff as a professional training.
I think so too, but
So I'm looking at it for myself personally, but I'm also looking at it for the, you know.
It's 11 hours.
I'm also very biased in in my agenda for pushing emotional intelligence because I do think it's helpful. I do think it works. I have seen it work in different people in different areas in different industries. And in today's world, I think we need it now more than ever because we're not emotionally regulating. We are just collectively operating out of fear and anger. And fear and anger as emotions can blur. So I do think it's really, really, really important. I mean, I know there's some trainings like you can do. I think LinkedIn has a couple,
They do, yeah.
like through LinkedIn, through
LinkedIn
LinkedIn
Learning.
Learning. Um, I'm trying to think of other places.
And if your institution doesn't give you a subscription to LinkedIn Learning, your local library, you can get access through, usually through your local library to get LinkedIn Learning for free.
Okay, got it.
But I mean, it's sometimes, if this is something you really want to do, it's finding a couple individuals to work on creating a larger presentation together to
Mhm.
be delivered. Like you could do that because there's so much out there on emotional intelligence. It's really just trying to help people understand, and this goes back to Sylvia's question from the beginning and, being direct. Like you can be direct. That's being assertive. And I think as long as you are constructive, if you come from a more assertive background, like Sylvia, you said you were Polish, right? Did I get that
Yes.
correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
So part of my other life was not that this has anything to do with Polish, but I grew up and I learned German. I was a German major, lived in Germany, studied in Germany. They're also very direct. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I do think that in order for us to not lose our directness, but also, sometimes the directness is required. And then other times I think we can tone it down a bit based on whoever the audience is. But I will say with students, it can be really frustrating. Like I am thoroughly frustrated this semester, in ways that I have not been frustrated in the 15 years I've been teaching. And
You're
I
not
have,
alone.
I also have to remember at the end of the day, like even though there's some of these students where I'm just like, um, every student that walks through my door has potential to be so much more than what they are right now. And I really have to keep that in the back of my mind. Um, because it is hard. I am frustrated that, and I was a super nerd. Like I love learning. I am a dork. Um, and I am proud of that fact. And I think I have to understand that we have created a system where that love of learning isn't natural anymore. Um, and then as a faculty member, then I struggle with, well, how do I make it like that? And these are things I struggle with on a daily basis. But with the emotional intelligence piece, it's really trying to, and I think you can have some people call it empathy boundaries. Other people call it selective empathy. Like I am empathetic to a point. And once I hit that threshold, that's when I become more assertive and direct. Like, hey, I really understand that, this was the only time you could schedule a doctor's appointment during my class. I know I am not like the first thing that you think of when you wake up. And, if they do it once, they'll do it a couple times again. And by the second or third time, I'm like, I can't help you. If you miss something in class, then you need to reach out to somebody else in class to figure it out. But I empathize with faculty and K-12 teachers who walk into the classroom every day trying to make better humans, but also trying to do it without getting so completely frustrated and overwhelmed and burned out. I think that's where a lot of people are right now.
Yeah,
And
can I share that I mentor adjunct faculty at my college because I was an adjunct for 17 years
Mhm.
before I got full time. And one of our adjuncts who taught in public school for 20 years or 30 years, obviously a very skilled teacher, has had one severe interaction with the student where they were just like at war with each other. I mean, verbally, it's gotten out of control. And so I would like her to see this webinar. If you guys record it, I at least took pictures. But I'm interested in possibly having you come do this presentation for our learning retreat that we do for full-time faculty.
okay.
I think this would be awesome. And I'm in direct contact with the person who does the Center for Teaching and Learning at our college, and she might be open to this. So if you
Okay.
put your email in the chat, I would really appreciate it. Because
Yeah.
I do see a need for, I do see I hear what you're saying, that student interaction with faculty has just gotten a little bit more wonky in the last few years.
Yeah.
And the frustration level among faculty has gotten sky high. We kind of babied them during COVID, and now we're not supposed to baby them, but it's gotten really, there's a lot of high frustration level.
Yeah. No, I understand. I do.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question, and looks like Wanda has her hand up, excuse me.
Thank you so much, Alissa. Ms. Carrie, I have a question for you in regard to we talking about the student. It's so good to hear that I'm not the only one going through it. I think this is something that is productive of being attending here. However, I would say that what about creating workshops like that we can share with the students about the intentionality of growing, because experience help into the emotional intelligence. I see that portion. And as more we are engaging with people and through our careers, that help us, that it's the basic of emotional intelligence, but not the all. And I can see as an opportunity also for students, this information and engaging them as well. So if you have a portal, for that type of engagement or presentation, please let me know, because I do have a way to engage through in a series that we said that is for engagement empowerment for those students. And the second thing that is more a comment, it's about the sense of after the pandemic, I think it's been a strong force that it have impact your idiosyncratic, your method of communicating, because now we cannot say that we are not communicating. We have all the tools, but it's the time that I'm seeing less responses to what we have given to the students. So, and I see it as a disengagement. From the beginning, they're in disengaged completely of the sense of relevance and importance of what they have to do in order to reach their goal. And because that they're not retained, and I am a retention person. So, so that's the comment.
So part of that is, so the disengagement started happening probably around 2012, 2013. It was compounded with the pandemic. And I think what we're seeing now is a culmination of, and again, I have nothing but respect for faculty, for K through 12 teachers, but it's a culmination of a broken system, the influx of technology, specifically social media, on the prevalence of loneliness, the prevalence of bullying, the prevalence of all these other things. and you're having it all come to a head. And I think that is part of what we're seeing right now. I don't have all the answers of how to fix it. To start is creating, education that works for 21st century students, but that takes work, time, money, effort. But I also look at a whole generation of students that we're going to lose if we don't figure something out. And it's not because we're not trying. It's, I don't think any of us have figured out exactly how to reach them yet. And I am trying like hell to figure that out. And it is really frustrating. um, and this is why I have a wine subscription. But, um, I think that we are all shepherds in this. We are all doing our part. And I just hope that we can find a way to stick together, regardless of what college we work for. It's the same generation of students. And I think by having these conversations, we open up ourselves to those possibilities of figuring it out and helping and moving us forward.
Carrie, this has been so awesome, and we've definitely hit a very popular topic here. So we might need to have a part 2.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time and everything you've shared. The toolkit of things to say is golden. Thank you. And I love that someone said they're going to put these on Post-it notes and put them on their monitor in their office. I think that's great. So Carrie has provided her email in the chat. It's carnold@chesapeake.edu. So for those of you who are seeking additional information or want to perhaps connect with her outside of this, thank you, Carrie, for providing that. And this is being recorded, and we'll be sure to get that shared with everyone. And thank you all for joining and engaging in this great session today. Carrie, thank you so much. This has been fabulous.
Thank you all, and thank you all for doing what you keep doing every single day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.